when I turn this thing on, it's found a new 0 point, and it's right across the ceiling, looking at the top of the lights. So I have to reposition it down to here. Yeah, for some reason it lost its home. You know, it used to go down to this area for home, and it doesn't anymore.
Hopefully about 20 minutes in the meeting, it'll find its way back.
You know,
Won't look at us anymore.
you're looking at the cobwebs. I'll keep an eye on it.
There you
Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting, the Zoning Board of Appeals for January 24th, 2022. I'd kindly like to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome. We'll begin by reviewing the draft minutes of our previous meeting. Held on December 20th, 2021. I make a motion to approve the minutes for the members second.
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Approved without amendment. We'll review the agenda for the tonight's meeting as it was posted on the town website. First applicant is Tamarack Solar LLC for a property at 126 Brick Church Road concerning a solar facility. The applicant is requesting a 12-month extension on the 2 area variances that were approved on the project concerning utility poles and setbacks. And the second is Atlas Renewables LLC concerning property located at Shippey Lane and also Brunswick Road for a solar facility. Going to ask Attorney Gilchrist, please, if you just kindly review the purpose of public hearing tonight for the first applicant and the reason why we're holding it, please.
I can. So on this particular application, Tamarack Solar had previously undergone full review on area variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals, as well as full site plan and special use permit review in front of the Planning Board, and underwent a full review under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Under the provisions of the Brunswick zoning law, those approvals have a 1-year duration unless a building permit is pulled and construction starts. Due to several factors, as indicated by the applicant, the owner of the project, including availability of materials, supply chain issues, and certain financing issues, there has been a request to extend that approval. The applicant has already been before the Brunswick Planning Board, and the Planning Board did extend the special use permit and site plan approval for an additional year, so that they will have a duration of 2 years from the initial approval. Under the Brunswick zoning law, the particular language allows the Planning Board to extend those approvals in their discretion. The language concerning the extension on area variances under the Brunswick zoning law, however, indicates the following: any variance that is not exercised within 1 year of the date it is issued shall lapse without further hearing by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Because the zoning law uses the term hearing, it was advisable to take a conservative approach and hold a public hearing tonight. It is indicated by the applicant that there is no proposed change to the project. The project is as previously presented and approved. The public hearing is for the sole purpose of adding additional time during which those approvals will be in place to allow construction of the project.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'm going to ask the applicant if you can kind of give a brief overview of the project
Sure.
before we open up the public hearing.
Yes. Shall I speak to the? Sure.
Certainly.
My name is Gillian Black. I'm with Eden Renewables. This is our project. We're purchasing the land and building a community solar project. We'll be farming the balance of, or having farmed the balance of the existing parcel. We'll be implementing numerous measures for biodiversity throughout the project site. And we're very excited to have complete the process and thank the board for having us back again, or having me back, I should say. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, Andy, Mr. Gilchrist put it very well, explained it thoroughly, that we need additional time to go through our financing. And when we take a project out to finance, we need to make sure that we have enough time. There's supply chain issues. Who knows what would happen with another pandemic or whatnot. So we try to build in as much headroom as we can when we go through these processes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm here for any questions.
Yeah, fine, yes.
Thank
And then just to review what the zoning board has approved is the setback. It requires 100 feet, but I believe 20 feet is being approved. And then the number of utility poles.
Right, and the setback in this case was on the northern property boundary, which is shared with another solar project. So it made sense to squeeze it up there, and by getting the variance, we were able to keep the solar project out of the portion of the property which is more visible to the public. And so it's tucked away quite nicely. And the poles, whenever we interconnect to the utility grid, they require us to put in a certain amount of poles, some of which are owned by National Grid and some of which are owned by us. We used a pad-mounted set of switchgear so that we could limit the number of poles. Typically, a system of this size would have 7 poles, but we're down to about 2. And that's what the variance was for 2, to allow us to connect to the utility line.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Appreciate that with that. So the first time of business, how we'll do, we'll open up the public hearing on this application, noting that the notice was published in the Troy Record, placed on the town sideboard, placed on the town website, and mailed to owners of adjacent property within 300 feet of the project.
So I'll read the public hearing notice with one correction. The official newspaper for the town is now the Eastwick Press, and
Thank you.
this notice was published in the Eastwick Press.
Thank you.
Notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Zoning Board of Appeals of the town of Brunswick at 6 p.m. on Monday, January 24, 2022, at the Brunswick Town Hall, 336 Town Office Road, Brunswick, New York, 12180, concerning the application submitted by Tamarack Solar LLC for extensions of 2 previously approved area variances for a large-scale solar project on property located at 126 Brick Church Road. Copies of the application are available at the Brunswick Town Hall and are available for public inspection during regular business hours. All interested persons will be heard at the public hearing.
Thank you very much. So now the zoning board will open the floor for receipt of public comment. If anybody would like to speak for or against the application, you're invited to do so. Chuck, I was just curious to know if the zoning board is in receipt of any written comments.
We have received no written or email comments on this subject.
Thank you. Are there any questions by any of the zoning board members? I have none.
No. No.
So hearing no public comment, I would make a motion to close the public hearing. Would a member second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Patricia. All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is closed. So is the zoning board members delivering or?
Well, the only issue in front of the zoning board is in fact the requested extension. There really aren't the necessary elements. This is simply a request for the extension. Again, we'll note for the record that the planning board has extended the special use permit and site plan approvals for the additional year, subject to a reiteration of conditions attached to the original approval. As And that would be the issue in front of this board as to whether to extend the approvals, and if yes, whether the original conditions should be continued. And for the duration of the extension, knowing that the planning board extended it for an additional year.
So as the planning board extended their approvals, the site plan, I would make a motion that the zoning board also extends the 12-month approval of the 2 area variances that were previously sought by the applicant. I believe that brings us out to May 17th. That's when we originally approved it. So it'll be 12 months from there.
Correct. And if that's proposed, I would suggest simply reiterating any conditions attached to the approvals will be continued.
I think that should be attached.
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So the extension has been allowed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care. They'll be on the website in a minute, correct? Yeah.
Okay, our second application, and reviewed in the agenda, is for Atlas Renewables at 2 properties, Brunswick Road and Shippey Lane. So since we last met in December, we are in receipt of the review letter by the Burge Group that we requested for an outside engineering firm to take a look at the application and to kind of give us their idea, their review. And Ron LaBerge is here tonight to answer any questions that we may have. So maybe we can begin by allowing the applicant to kind of go forward, if there's anything that has changed since December, and then maybe we could bring our questions to Mr. LaBerge and go from there, and then maybe if the applicant has questions, so we can have a discussion moving forward.
Good evening.
Hi,
Thank you
thank
for
you for
giving me
coming
the
tonight.
opportunity. We are here, the main purpose of today's meeting from our side is to listen the board, listen the Birch Group. We received this report by Thursday last week. We are preparing our comments. We wanted to hear if there are additional questions, and then probably 1 week or a couple of weeks, we will submit the written comments to these questions. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for the support of this process. We are here today to listen and to take notes of your comments and questions.
Great, sounds like a good plan. Thank you. We're glad you're here tonight. So Mr. LaBerge, if you want to come and we can go over it together. I know there's some notes and some questions that the members have. So,
Okay, certainly. First of all, Happy New Year, everybody.
thank you.
So we did, kind of went through the application from just a check the box standpoint, make sure it's complete and everything else. So you'll see there's a few items there that I think should be clarified as far as visual assessment form and electrical grid connection capability. Just checking boxes on the code. Briefly, what approvals are required based on our review. Obviously, there's the use variance, which everybody's well aware of. There's also going to be variances for setback, at least based on the plan that was presented. It's a concept plan, so and it's very large scale. So the applicant will need to detail that out further. And of course, we have the above grade poles similar to the last one, so, which is similar to all of these, right? So there's special permits, site plan approval requirements. I did note DEC and Army Corps, there are wetlands in the area, and they probably will be avoided, but I'd like to see the final delineation and the final plan arrangement before we say they're not required. As far as the EAF is concerned, I won't get into all these. There was some information that was incorrect. Some just still need to be filled out. So I believe I heard that they're going to address that, and then we don't need to go through those item by item. And this is really a question for the board's attorney, whether this should be a single seeker review, since there are two projects close by, same applicant. So is it really one project? I don't know. That's just a discussion point that.
We could review that and
Correct.
discuss that with the applicant. There certainly are two various applications, but we may want to review this as one action.
Right.
Under seeker cumulative.
Correct.
Yep.
The other, from a visibility standpoint, I thought they could provide some more information on, the surrounding area and the elevations relative to the elevations of the proposed arrays. They did provide some visualizations, but there was really no datum to it. Where am I when I'm looking at that? So similar to what we do with other solar and even cell towers, where are the high points we can see this from? We would want to know impact letter from SHPO. That was C3. I noticed I didn't write down SHPO. And then a couple comments or comment to both. Again, the utilities are going to be above grade poles. It appears we're going to violate the 100-foot setback. As far as the Brunswick, there is a single family home there that's kind of completely surrounded by the project. So that would just need to kind of get fleshed out a little more as access easements, et cetera. And
On the Shippey Lane.
on the Shippey Lane, yes, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And I'm not even sure. I did not check the ownership, if that's the same owner that's selling the property or not, but it's very close. And Shippey Lane's pretty narrow. So that's something the fire department should be also review, just to make sure they can get apparatus in and out, or if they need any improvements to the road. We've all been through the long driveway discussions. And this is basically, Shippey Road is basically a long driveway. Same for the Sickaway Solar Farm. They are proposing a driveway into the site, and we just got to make sure the fire department's satisfied with access. The remainder of the letter is really some discussion about the detailed explanation that the applicant provided as to perhaps why they should be entitled to a use variance based on being a utility. I kind of put these down here really more for thoughts for the board to consider and for discussion with Mr. Gilchrist. The engineer playing attorney, so you always got to be careful about that. So I don't know if you'd like to go through each one of these, or
Yeah, well, at some point I would, so maybe now's a good time to do
that's fine.
Sure.
That's fine. Okay. So let me see here. Basically, and again, I was thinking about this from a use standpoint and from the standpoint saying, well, we have to be here because, the connection to the grid is here. And so there's a lot of connections to the grid. And why does it have to be in Brunswick is one question. If I thought about this from the standpoint of this site and why it would have to be this site based on that standard. But, there's a lot of connection points to the grid. It doesn't necessarily have to be on this property that's not zoned correctly. But that's A. B, my understanding of the law, which, as I said, it's the engineer playing lawyer, is that there had to be a need. So similar to unlike cell towers, where a cell tower has to be in a certain geographic area to cover a certain service area, right? a solar facility can go just about anywhere, sun shines everywhere. So I'm not sure that that applies. And of course, again, that's going to be up to Mr. Gilchrist to help you make that determination. But there is electrical service. It's safe. There's not like a local need for electricity here. As I mentioned, these arrays, they put power on the grid. That power can go anywhere. Doesn't necessarily have to be local. So if they can't sell it locally, they can sell it someplace else. These just, you've seen a lot of other arrays come into town, all within the appropriate zone, as far as I know. So, I don't know what kind of impact that has to, this particular application. I don't know. It just seems it can be done. Again, a convenient connection. Does it have to be in Brunswick? I did go on the National Grid website, and they showed the substations. A lot of that information was presented in the documents provided by the applicant. So I just kind of went through and said, well, here are some other ones that appear to have some hosting capacity. Whether it makes sense or not, I don't know. I'll tell you I'm the first one to admit I'm not an expert in the economics of solar systems, but there just seem to be other areas that can be looked at. In regard to economic analysis, there really isn't one in the report. It's more of a general statement, and I don't doubt that extending electrical power lines is expensive. But again, it was just a very general statement. I would think that at a use variance level, something a little more robust would be required to be submitted for proof. Then the last one is if they're really considered a utility. Again, I'm thinking of this Rosenberg, case law, and I always look at National Grid as a utility that's conveying the power, and the rest of them are just commercial operations selling power. So this is all case law, I guess, according to our discussions, that was up in the air a little bit, right? But those were just for thoughts. They're not engineering comments per se. It's just extend to the use variance. And that was it. Any questions on any of those?
I appreciate your comments on taking it from a use variance angle.
Oh, thank you.
Even though there's not necessarily engineering comments.
Right.
I appreciate that very much. I just kind of had a general question, could apply to this, could apply to other applications as well. When you talk about maybe doing a single environmental review, what if you found something on one site that you didn't find on the other that would indicate, like archaeologically? If you had some findings, discovered some findings archaeologically in one area but not in the other, would that necessitate two reviews then? And that's just an example.
And in that regard, it's going to come down to, let's say they find something they have to deal with. Part of the environmental review is going to be as well, are you going to deal with it? Are you going to do further cultural resource investigation and mitigation, really? Mm-hmm. Or are they going to work around it? Because it doesn't necessarily that would change how you would think about the environmental impact. So if they're going to work around it, the impact is still not significant. I guess the question is, and again, Andy, I'm going to defer to you, but if each project can stand on its own without the other, then maybe it does make more sense. But if it basically we have to have both these to make this economically feasible, then I think it should be combined.
Interesting, yeah.
Right, and I will add, that's one part of it, and it's a relevant part of it. But in my opinion, seeker review would be particular to each site. You've got to examine each site.
Mm-hmm.
But what the seeker regulations also address are potential cumulative impacts. And this can be a whole host of bases where the projects are interrelated or they can stand on their own. or if one is likely to be undertaken as a result of the other. And these are some things that I'm sure the applicant's going to respond to for further information to the board, but there are certain legal triggers for what's called a cumulative impact analysis, looking at these two separate projects to see if there's any cumulative impacts. And an example of that many times can be things like traffic, where there'll be interconnected road systems, or one project may generate traffic that will impact another site as well. Here, we've got two seemingly independent solar projects, but that doesn't necessarily mean a cumulative assessment won't be undertaken. We'll look at that issue.
Okay.
And maybe Chuck and Andy, just to clarify this, what Mr. Birch brought up, it was 6D, talking about other sites in the town that have been installed or before the town to be installed. So just to get clarification and confirmation, all the solar facilities that are in place now were proposed for land that was zoned for those facilities. That's my understanding.
That is correct. There was no zoning change required in any of the built systems that we have now. That would be Hope Solar, Borrego Solar, and Duesenberry. There were area variances asked for, obviously, because of the poles. And in some cases, in the case of the gentleman with Eden stating that he did ask for as well as Hope also had an area variance too regarding setback, but no use variances. Everything was
Right.
zoned for.
And I'll confirm that. The three that are built were on sites where the zoning district allowed large-scale commercial solar. Tamarack Solar, which is approved but not yet built, is also on a property that is zoned allowing large-scale commercial solar. There are other projects that have been proposed or technically in the review process that have been consistent with zoning districts. The one that is not part of the project site is not zoned, and that is the CDE North America application. And procedurally, they've opted to request a zone change for actually two parcels, but for part of the project site that would allow the project to move forward. But on that particular project, percentages are close, but about 2/3 of the project site are zoned for large-scale commercial solar.
So do any of the members have any questions? They need more explanation about what's in the report? Examples of what's in the report?
I have one.
Sure.
So what is the, when you're talking about the electricity in queue at the substations?
Well, that's how many, my understanding of queued means that they have so much capacity and they're expecting so much more coming on. to take away, so it would reduce the available capacity by the amount in the queue. So for instance, if there's 10 megawatts available, but they could have another array coming online with a 5 megabyte or megabytes, yeah, everything's computers now. 8 megawatt, that would be 5 megawatts in queue because it's not on the system yet.
Okay.
And then just to kind of, that's a great question, and just kind of take that further. When you talk about Q, because they've had proposals to establish a commercial.
That's correct. And I'm not sure how far in their approval process they are.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I don't understand that part. When I was trying to find that out when it was in there, but I'm assuming it's fairly certain they're going to come online.
So this is almost like it's set aside for this other,
Right. They have so much capacity and there's a set aside for some people who are kind of ahead of them
right,
or whoever, whichever substation you happen to be looking at. And trying to get some solar online or wind or whatever it is.
Just more generally, not necessarily the excellent review report that you have for us, but is there a certain, could you determine the number of acres or that's allowable for commercial solar in the town of Brunswick? Could that number be determined that in the town of Brunswick, according to its zoning,
You could,
this would be the number that's
Should be
allowed
able to do
develop as a commercial solar
you
facility?
should be able to do it by the zoning, certainly, because you
Uh-huh.
could look at the zones it's allowable in.
Right,
Then you have to back out of that, how much of it's developed. Right? So if you're just looking, so you have to, looking for a gross number, we can certainly find that out.
yeah, right.
It
So
would
then
be,
you would have to subtract from that number what's already been developed, what already is developed.
That's correct. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's, yeah,
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting number. Chuck, were you gonna say something about
no,
that?
just we would be adding up the ag overlay and the ag areas currently.
right. And I just have to check the GIS that's available because, then you might be able to just look at in that area, how much is actually, say, in an agricultural district. Because that's, if it's in an agricultural district, it's not developed.
Yeah,
And we can kind of use those type of things to maybe come up with a little better number. But yeah, we can certainly track something like that down.
right. So then from that number, could you also determine which ones would have the capacity to go onto those substations?
That would be quite an undertaking, I think.
Uh-huh.
Or is there a choice in which substation they hook up to?
Pardon me?
Is there a
Yeah.
choice in which substation that they're going to hook up to? Like we're just learning that the project on Oakwood Avenue would be hooked up to the North Troy substation.
Right. So they would, right. So it's all back proximity, essentially, right, to which substation. So this one, I got to remember now. Right. They're looking at the Sickaway substation. There is a Brunswick substation further out. So you can, of course, there's not a lot of capacity left on that. So I could probably provide a map showing where the substation is located and the area, where it's allowed by zoning. And that would give you a spatial relationship anyway. I don't think I could go through an analysis of say, how much power you can move here or there. But if you're just looking to try to understand what land mass is available and where it would likely connect to, that's a map we could probably put together fairly easily.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
Because that was one of the questions that I had when we were talking about the total of all the projects together. And we kept hearing about the limited capacity of the transmission lines and
Right.
the added cost of $1 million a mile per line. So geographically, based on where all these projects are and what substation are going to be hooking up to, that's probably going to make our determination on whether or not we think that these are allowable or not. Because if we're saying that there's not enough capacity, but depending on what substation they're going to, that could change the board's determination on that.
It could, I understand that. The other.
Because what's the need for the facility if the transmission lines can't carry the capacity anyway, but we don't know that.
Well, that goes back to the bigger question of what's the need for the facility, period.
Right.
Right? Is it needed locally?
Right.
I mean, again, this comes down to all the legal aspects of it. But again, I mean, I kind of look at it very simply. It's, yeah, okay, it'd be nice to be near easily transportable, power where, you have the lines there and everything. But at some point, that's not going to exist either, right? Everything's just going to get used up. But anyway, but that's why you guys get to make that great choice, right? So, but yeah, we'll create the map and then we go through that and see what it looks like. Any other questions?
And then, in the big picture, is there any type of maximum number or, like a full capacity that a town has to bear the burden of for solar facilities? So if we have a certain percentage of land that's zoned for this, and then a certain percentage of that is used, what would be capacity? So, when does a town kind of tap out? What does that look like?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Right. So if,
When there's no demand that I'm aware of, right? Right now, National Grid, through whoever's selling them power, provides plenty of power to Brunswick. So I don't know that there'd be a formula or an allocation or anything like that as to how much solar should be permitted. I don't, and that's certainly not in your local law. And I'm not aware of any standard or requirement to that regard. I guess in theory, you could put solar arrays everywhere and produce more, 10,000 times more power than Brunswick needs.
well, could you though? So that, I guess that's my question. So could you? Because that would be determined on the substations, right? And what the substations could take.
Correct. Oh, that's correct, right. You would have to obviously expand substations, transmission lines, everything,
Yeah.
which is going to happen eventually. Somebody's going to have to do that. Otherwise, they're not going to build any more solar, right? It's like, okay, it's too far away. There's no capacity at the substation. Unless National Grid builds more, capacity into them or the solar company pays to do it or however it would work out, you're done, right? There's no place for it to go.
So, but one of the comments that was made in an earlier discussion was that even with these solar farms, it doesn't mean that the town of Brunswick would even be using the power that comes off them.
Correct.
That there's the possibility that if people didn't subscribe or whatever they have to do to use the power,
Right.
then it could be, I don't know what the term is, sold off to
Correct. It'll be,
Somebody
if excess
else.
power, it's going to go, it's on the
Like
grid, it's going to go,
RPI could
anybody can buy it.
take it all up and use all of it.
Right. my
So
understanding.
therefore, does that not speak to that we have enough power, there's not the need?
Well, I look at it very simply. And again, there's no problem that I am aware of in the town of Brunswick with people turning on a light switch. Right. So again, not like cell towers where, on Route 2, there's a dead spot and we need a tower to fix it, right? That tower has to be right there to fix that problem. I'm not aware of a problem in the town of Brunswick that requires a power generator to be in any specific location. right? There's convenience to be close. But you're right. I mean, basically, you and I are saying the same thing. There's no particular need for it. You know, that's setting aside, you know, the arguments about, you know, green energy and
Right,
those types of
right.
things.
So how would an applicant go about to prove that there is a need for electricity?
To be honest with you, I don't really have any idea. That had to show brownouts, you know, basically it'd probably be, you know, how often does National Grid have to, you know, brown us out or things like that. But I'm not really sure entirely, you know, it's kind of a different type of question than we're usually dealing with. Right?
Sure, no, I
Uh,
appreciate your input very much. Yeah, no, I think we're all learning from the discussion that we're having right now.
Yeah, no, this is you triggered this current triggered a thought. I lost it. I'm getting to that age now. They don't stick too long.
Yeah, it'll come back.
Yes. Let's see, it had to do with, nah, you're right, it'll come back.
Yep.
Oh, I know, it was just really just to add on. It comes back to, is there safe and adequate service now, right? That's, again, that's coming back to what's in the Rosenberg decision or whatever it was, right? It's all about safe and adequate service. So they would have to demonstrate that that doesn't exist, in my opinion, to kind of use that Rosenberg as a standard. Yeah.
And then just real quickly,
Yeah.
one last thing, just to expound on your comment that the applicant is commercial use selling power through the utility.
Well, again, I was thinking about this in terms of, again, the Rosenberg decision. And, you know, there's a lot of talk about utilities. So is a power generator a utility, or is it basically a commercial venture selling power to a utility, or, you know, transporting power through a utility? I mean, the power lines have to be in certain places, right? Now, I can see where it might apply to power lines and so on and so forth, but the power generator doesn't necessarily have to be there. I mean, I'd like to bring it to an extreme. You wouldn't build a coal plant here or a gas plant here. I mean, even though it's convenient to connect, right? So I kind of lumped them all together.
Sure.
You know? A power generator is a power generator. But again, I'm going to leave the definition, the legal definition, you know, Andy's going to have to work out. Again, these are just kind of thoughts that I have about how to approach this. I mean, it's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We appreciate your
Yeah,
thoughts.
definitely.
So, I don't know if any other questions at this time? Do you want to sit down and maybe then if Andy?
Yeah, no, that'd be fine.
Talk about some of the points that have been brought up, or you want to do that at another time?
Right, what I'd like to do, there are a lot of legal issues associated with this, is provide the board with some legal counsel, and we can do that through a private session,
Mhm.
seeking advice from counsel on some of these legal points. And I think that'd be the appropriate start.
Good plan. Does the applicant have any questions?
Thank you very much. The purpose was to listen to Ms. LaBerge, plus listen your questions. We'll prepare in the next week or 2 weeks the comments, not only to Mr. LaBerge, but also your comments. We'll try to integrate into a written response, and we'll submit it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Again, you can do that through the building department, and the building department will
Fantastic.
make sure that we receive your comments. Other than that, Are there any other new items of business that would like to be discussed or brought up at this time? I wanna make-
I think if you would like to formally put the Atlas Renewable Project on your February agenda.
We would, and we can do that officially to change the date because
Yeah,
there is a
yeah.
holiday, there's President's Day on February the 21st. So we would, that's the third Monday of the month, so we would move it to the 28th.
Yep.
Make that official, but we're going to do that for our next meeting in February. And then you can join us and be included on the agenda if you wish on February 28th, Monday at 6.
Is that going to be an executive session? Talk about the legal matters or? is that-
Right, so this date would be the new date for the regular meeting of the zoning board of appeals. We will come to a date for that executive meeting to
Okay, it'll
receive
be a
legal
different-
counsel, yeah.
If we can take 5 minutes when we're done here, I'd like to go into private session and just frame some issues for you for thoughts. We'll obviously have to do some more kind of review and analysis of it, but I at least want to frame the issues for you tonight. And then we can always follow up with an additional private session.
Okay. So not hearing any other new business, we changed the date of our regular meeting for February to the 28th. I would make a motion to close tonight's meeting. Would a member second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Patricia. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is closed. Thank you, everybody.
Ron, if you could, you can certainly invite your